August is here, and that means that the weather and the election cycle are heating up. The best way to beat the heat and stay up to date on the latest news from the US election to international breaking headlines is to become a DSR member and gain access to additional content across our network, in addition to other exclusive benefits. Use code BEATTHEHEAT to get 50% off of your membership and sign up today at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's Beat the Heat at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. Now please enjoy the show.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. Republicans are now openly saying that Donald Trump could cost them their chances of winning control of the Senate. The Hill reports that GOP aides and strategists fear that Trump's inability to adjust to Kamala Harris's surge is shifting the Senate map against them, an extraordinary development given how heavily tilted that map is for the Republican Party this cycle. So we thought we'd check in with Justin Baraski, a veteran Democratic operative who has worked on many Senate races over the years and is now working on races in Ohio and Arizona. He's going to help us break down the map and understand how realistic these GOP fears are, as well as what all this says about the true nature of Harris's surge and of Trump's struggles. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so here's the big picture. Presuming Democrats lose the West Virginia seat of Senator Joe Manchin, they cannot afford to lose any more seats on net without losing the Senate. They have extremely tough races in defending incumbent Senator Sherrod Brown in Ohio and Montana Senator John Tester, and pretty tough races defending incumbents Jackie Rosen in Nevada, Bob Casey in Pennsylvania, and Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. Meanwhile, Representative Ruben Gallego is challenging Kari Lake for the Arizona seat, and Representative Elissa Slotkin is running for the Michigan seat. Dems have to win both. Justin, is this the toughest map you've ever seen for Democrats?
No, I mean, it's sort of here we go again when it comes to the Senate map for Democrats. You know, in 2020, nobody thought Democrats were going to take the Senate back. We had a really tough map, and we took it back. In 2022, nearly everyone thought we were going to lose the Senate, given all the places we were on defense and some of the tough challenger races. And not only did we successfully defend every Democratic incumbent, we actually picked up a seat. So here we are again for at least the third cycle in a row where conventional wisdom is that this is a incredibly difficult map and that Democrats are probably in trouble. And yet if you go race by race, you'll see that Democrats are winning and that Republican candidates across the board are struggling. So, you know, I don't. It's a tough map, but you know we've had a lot of tough maps recently, and we've come out on top every time. I think we will again.
There's really no question that Democrats have been defying expectations when it comes to Senate races lately, and it's a pretty remarkable thing. So the Hill report shows deep Republican anxiety about Trump right now. Harris has now gone up in the polls in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and even possibly in Arizona. One GOP aide amazingly tells The Hill that Trump isn't being aggressive enough in going after Harris. Translation, that means that Harris's favorable ratings are rising and Trump is not succeeding in blunting that rise. And this is real trouble for GOP Senate candidates, is it not?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a bit of a miscalculation from Republicans who, you know, just went through sort of a coronation at their convention that was sort of brimming with overconfidence. And I'm not sure how they were so unprepared to run against Kamala, but it does seem like Trump is a little unprepared. And Trump is Trump. He sort of is, I think if there's one thing we've learned about him is he remains consistent and doesn't really change. Regardless of what the political environment is. And at the moment, that's causing them some problems.
In Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, it does look like Democrats hold pretty significant leads in some of these Senate races. And in the two Sunbelt states, the two big Sunbelt races in Arizona and Nevada as well. When the Republicans complain on background to reporters about this situation, what are they really saying? Like, what do they need Trump to do, say, in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, to actually make those races winnable for them? Like, what do they really need Trump to actually do?
Well, I'm never going to be one to guess what Republicans are saying in private conversations anymore. But, I think globally, this has been the problem with the Republican approach to Senate races in recent cycles, is they don't understand that it isn't about what Donald Trump says. It isn't about what Joe Biden says, or Kamala Harris for that matter. These races, and I've been saying this to you for a long time, Greg, these races are choices between the two candidates on the ballot. Senate races are mini presidentials. The Senate race in Ohio is over $250 million in spending. There are a number of other Senate races where that number is going to be true, or at least be approached. And so you really are able to make this a choice between the two candidates. In state after state, Republicans have a candidate quality problem. Once again, this is something that's been problematic for them for many years, going as far back to 2010. But it's definitely a problem right now. Their recruits, many of them are damaged by a lack of connection to the states they're running in. They have numerous scandals stemming from their finances. They lie about their biographies, or even more innocuous things. And then they're disqualifying on issues that really matter to people, specifically on abortion. Every Republican Senate candidate is on record opposing a woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions.
Yeah, this is the big story right there, what you just said.
Yeah. And so, when you have a candidate who has tenuous ties to their states, is mired in scandal, is constantly being caught in ridiculous lies, and then also happens to be in the wrong place on the issues, that's a real problem regardless of what's happening at the top of the ticket. And then when you pair it with the fact that, this crop of incumbent Democratic senators and challengers is an incredibly strong class. The incumbents, for the most part, are battle tested. They have won not only one race for Senate, many of them have won 2 or 3 times. Bob Casey is the only person ever to win 6 statewide elections in Pennsylvania. John Tester dramatically overperforms the environment literally every time he's on the ballot. Sherrod Brown was reelected with over 50% of the vote in 2018, overperforming the 2020 presidential results by 8 points. Tammy Baldwin won by 10 points in 2018. So these are really strong incumbents going up against deeply flawed candidates.
So I want to ask you about that, because a big part of the story here is that Republicans, because Senate races are extremely expensive, Republicans recruited a bunch of rich guys to run, but they seem to be suboptimal candidates with a bunch of baggage related to their finances.
Right.
David McCormick in Pennsylvania, Bernie Moreno in Ohio, Tim Sheehy in Montana. One GOP operative even admitted to the Huffington Post that this was the trade-off. It's worth some negative stories about them in order to have candidates who are spending a lot of money on TV later. Can you kind of walk us very quickly through these Republican candidates and why they seem sort of on the weaker side, I guess?
In theory, that's true. If you have a candidate that can spend a ton of money, it's worth the bad press. The problem is these candidates are experiencing constant bad press.
Right.
Yeah, so in Montana, you have fake cowboy Tim Sheehy, who lied about growing up in rural Minnesota, lied about how he started his business, and his own story of leaving the military is contradicted by something he's previously said. In Ohio, you have Bernie Moreno telling a fake rags to riches tale, lying about his family fleeing socialism, lying about refusing to sell Chinese-made cars, shredding documents to avoid paying employees overtime. In Pennsylvania, Dave McCormick has lied about living in Pennsylvania and whether or not he grew up on a farm under modest circumstances. In Wisconsin, Republicans are running a Californian, Eric Hovde, whose bank was sued for elder abuse at a senior living facility that he owned. In Arizona, Carrie Lake is running for Senate while still refusing to admit she lost the race for governor. Advocating enforcing an abortion ban from the 1860s and attacking John McCain. In Nevada, Sam Brown wants to allow nuclear waste to be stored at Yucca Mountain and backed an abortion ban in his real home state of Texas that has no exceptions for rape or incest. In Michigan, Mike Rogers is in trouble for enriching himself through ties to Chinese business interests. And you can go on down the line and find deeply flawed Republican candidates in every state who are sort of drowning right now. The problem with only caring about the candidates having money is a lot of times it seems Republicans don't seem to care, A, where the candidate's from, or B, how they made their money. And voters do seem to care.
Right. And then there's this other dynamic, right? Like for the longest time, it's been an article of faith that the voting in down ballot races like Senate contests will ultimately converge with the presidential vote share. And this goes to what you were saying earlier. In 2022, we saw a number of Democratic candidates outperform Biden's approval ratings by sizable margins, which helped produce the surprise Dem win in those midterms. Then, while Biden was the presidential candidate, many of these Dem incumbents were steadily outpolling him by sizable margins all through the year. Now that Harris is in there, Dems seem to have an even better shot at holding those Rust Belt states. But still, I mean, Sherrod Brown in Ohio and Jon Tester in Montana really have to outperform Harris big time to win. I mean, is that plausible? I mean, you actually are doing some of the ads for Brown, and you have long experience in Ohio. It seems to me that Trump has kind of changed that state in a way that really makes it more difficult for him than it maybe even was in 2018. What's your reading? Can he survive?
Absolutely, Sherrod can survive. And I don't think Donald Trump has changed the partisan makeup of the state. It is true that he won the state twice, but I don't think that speaks to where people are in Ohio. And recent history proves that. Not only was Sherrod Brown reelected by 7 points in 2018 after Trump won it by 8 points, but in 2022, there were 3 competitive congressional races in Ohio. One was a Republican incumbent down in the Cincinnati area. Another was Marcy Kaptur's district, which Trump won. And another was the Northeast Ohio seat in Summit County, which is Akron, Ohio, that's now occupied by Congresswoman Amelia Sykes, which is the closest of the 3 districts. And Democrats won all 3 districts. Then last year, there were ballot initiatives to do away with majority rule in Ohio, and Democrats successfully beat it back. There was a ballot initiative to legalize marijuana, and it was legalized. And there was a ballot initiative to enshrine abortion rights. And Democrats won all 3 of those races. And not for nothing, there was also a Senate race in 2022 that Republicans didn't think was going to be competitive at all. Initially planned to spend no money there, and then had to spend $40 million to drag Vance over the finish line. So this is still a very competitive state. And actually, we've seen when Democrats have investment in races, we actually win, like the 3 competitive congressional races, like the 3 ballot initiatives. So, this is still a much more competitive state than the presidential election would have you believe. It's true that Trump has connected with a certain amount of people here, but I don't think it translates in the Senate race. And I don't think anyone will tell you that the Senate race this cycle isn't extremely competitive with the hundreds of millions of dollars that national Republicans are spending here. But Sherrod has won tough races before. And as you mentioned, he has a history of overperforming, just like Senator Tester and many of our other Democratic Senate candidates, and they will again this time.
So in order to hold the Senate, what vulnerabilities does Harris really need to address on her part most, right? To give candidates like Brown and Tester a better shot at winning, they really need to outperform by a lot, but still every bit that they get from Harris helps, right? Does Harris have to moderate on the economy more, or does her populist agenda of addressing housing costs, a big child tax credit, and fighting price gouging, does that stuff actually help in those places, or would a more, I don't know, centrist economic agenda be better? And I guess on immigration, she's really got to stick to the I'm the border cop, I'm a prosecutor, and that type of messaging all the way through, right? What would give Democrats the best shot at holding the Senate on the part of addressing Harris' vulnerability?
Yeah, I really don't, I really don't accept the premise of the question, because I don't think these races are going to come down to the presidential election. And you said it best earlier, that we were winning these races before Harris was the nominee. If you went state by state when Biden was at his worst after the debate, John Tester, Sherrod Brown, Bob Casey, Jackie Rosen, Ruben Gallego, and on, they were all ahead in all the public polling that people could see. And it really is because these races are coming down to a choice between the two candidates on the ballot. And so there's no question that excitement at the presidential level is always helpful for whichever party is experiencing it. And obviously our party is experiencing it right now. But I really don't think the day-to-day and the issue battles in the presidential are going to have a big impact on these Senate races. The states are very competitive, so the races are going to be close. And of course, the Republicans are going to spend a ton of money, and these races are always close. But, I think the reason you're seeing so many Republicans going on background to reporters telling them they're worried about Trump is because deep down they know that their candidates running for Senate are problematic and flawed. And they don't want to say that.
Interesting. Trump becomes the scapegoat. Poor Trump. Let me ask you.
Yes.
So yeah. I mean, I think the big story here, or one of the big stories, is really that the Dobbs is still resonating heavily in these races. I mean, the Senate is really essential to the future of abortion rights in a lot of ways, and to the court, and it's essential to the courts, obviously. And the courts are not looking very good in the eyes of a lot of voters these days, in large part because of the striking down of abortion rights. Let me ask you, what's the bottom line here? I got to say, at the end of the day, it looks almost impossible. It looks almost impossible to believe the Democrats will hold the Senate. Are you going to tell me that it really is plausible?
No, it's absolutely plausible, because we just did it last cycle. Last cycle, every single reporter and every single sort of election handicapper said that Democrats had to run the table to hold the Senate, and Democrats ran the table to hold the Senate. And then they picked up a seat. So they have to do that again, which is no easy feat, but it is possible because they literally just did it. And they are running against a group of deeply flawed Republican candidates who have tenuous ties to their states, are drowning in scandals stemming from their finances, who lie about where they grew up, where they're from, what they've done, and have a disqualifying position on many issues, but specifically reproductive freedom. So is it going to be easy? No. If you look race by race, are we currently doing it? Yes.
Well, it's a good case. Justin Borowski, thanks so much for coming on with us today.
My pleasure. Happy to be on and happy to come back.
You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler on the DSR Network.